Co-powered by RK Marble, खूबसूरत ईमानदारी.
Good evening and welcome. You're on board the Newstrack. I'm Rahul Kanwal. The World Health Organization has declared monkeypox to be a public health emergency of international concern. What exactly does this mean for you, for me, and how do we ensure that we keep monkeypox far away? That and more coming up on the Newstrack tonight.
A new global health emergency.
Monkeypox among us.
And that trend is...
Cases rise across the globe. At least 4 infections in India. How infectious is monkeypox? How can it be prevented? Should you be worried? Top health experts speak. Monkeypox alert, big focus on Newstrack.
We have a power-packed, important, insightful program lined up for you tonight. Before I get into it, here are the headlines I'm tracking this evening. Mamata Banerjee breaks her silence over Partha Chatterjee's arrest, says she stands against corruption. ED claims the Bengal minister is faking illness to evade questioning. 4 Congress MPs suspended from the Lok Sabha for waving placards near the Speaker's chair. Manikaram Tagore, Jyoti Mani, Ramya Haridas and T.N. Pratapan suspended for the entire duration of the monsoon session. Draupadi Murmu takes oath as the 15th president. India welcomes the first tribal president. Murmu recounts her roots in her maiden speech.
मैं द्रौपदी मुर्मू
ईश्वर की शपथ लेता हूँ कि मैं श्रद्धापूर्वक भारत के राष्ट्रपति के पद का कार्यपालन करूंगी.
Bid to disrupt communal harmony amid the Khabar Yatra in Uttar Pradesh's Bijnor. 2 attackers donning saffron destroy tombs. Arrested accused identified as Kamal and Adil. Karnataka Congress CM Nataka explodes. Party mulls action against MLA Zamir Ahmed, who openly backed Siddaramaiah against DK Shiv Kumar. There are now 4 confirmed cases of monkeypox in India. A 5th infection is suspected to have been reported in Hyderabad. As cases rise across the country, there is a sense of anxiety that seems to be growing again. Is monkeypox going to be anything like COVID-19? Over the next half an hour, some of the country's top medical experts who are looking at the monkeypox menace very carefully will join me to dispel all doubts about this new global health emergency. But first, colleagues from the India Today Health team, Sneha Mordani and Milan Sharma, decode what exactly the monkeypox outbreak means for India and for the world.
The World Health Organization has triggered the highest alert yet again. Monkeypox, now prevalent in over 75 countries, is a public health emergency of international concern. The second disease to be tagged so in 3 years. But what exactly is a public health emergency of global concern?
A public health emergency of international concern is defined as an event that requires the whole world to sit up and pay attention. It must be a disease or a health condition that is sudden, unexpected, goes beyond a country's borders, and requires a coordinated response from multiple nations all at once.
The WHO's 16-member emergency committee has declared global health emergencies 6 times in the last 14 years. Of the 6 times that the World Health Organization declared public health emergency of international concern, only twice did the infection outbreak move to the pandemic stage. Once in 2009 with the H1N1 flu pandemic, the second time in 2020 when COVID-19 was declared a pandemic. In 2009, WHO declared H1N1 or swine flu, also known as Mexican flu, a pandemic. In 2014, polio virus was declared a public health emergency with an increase in cases of wild polio cases. Again, in 2014, Ebola was declared a public health emergency of international concern. Same with Zika virus in 2016. Also in 2019, Ebola was again declared a public health emergency of international concern. The last time around in January 2020, COVID-19 was first declared a public health emergency of international concern and then a pandemic. But is monkeypox going to assume pandemic proportions? Will there be widespread infections and lockdowns? Should we brace for the worst? Experts say that this is not a lethal disease. The death rate is low and that this is not COVID. COVID is airborne. Monkeypox spreads through prolonged physical contact with the patient. COVID is more transmissible. Monkeypox is not highly transmissible. COVID invited mass lockdowns. Monkeypox is unlikely to lead to lockdowns. No wildfire spread expected in monkeypox. COVID, meanwhile, continues to see wide transmissions. The concern is that even though not very transmissible, the infection will percolate to the general population eventually.
Men who have sex with men, and this virus is spreading along these networks, and it's important to realize that these networks don't exist in isolation. These men could have multiple other partners. Many of them could have a regular family.
Experts also say that this is the time to change the nomenclature and ensure that stigmatization does not take place.
Stop calling it monkeypox. Declare this as a sexually transmitted infection. It is not spread through respiratory means like COVID. So the attention will be focused on sexual transmission. Currently, all 100% cases are sexual transmission. 99% are male to male and 1% male to female or female to female. So in that kind of situation, we should declare this as STI.
So far, monkeypox doesn't look like causing a pandemic, but health bodies worldwide are keeping a close watch. In New Delhi, Sneha Moldani for India Today.
Is monkeypox a sexually transmitted disease? Is it a skin infection? How transmissible is it? How does this compare with the COVID pandemic? Because this is the second time in 2 years that the World Health Organization has declared a particular disease a public health emergency of international concern, PHEIC. What in the world does that mean for you and for me? Joining us to debate and discuss this very critical health emergency on the Newstrack, we've got a very fine panel of top doctors. I want to welcome first Dr. Suresh Kumar. He's the medical director at the LNJP hospital in the capital, which is where one of the monkeypox patients is being treated. The first patient in Delhi who didn't travel abroad but somehow managed to contact monkeypox is being treated under Dr. Kumar's personal care. So we'll ask him how that's going. We have Dr. Shahid Jamil, leading virologist, fellow at the Green Templeton College, University of Oxford in the United Kingdom, one of our leading virologists. We've got Dr. Chandrakant Lahiria, epidemiologist and vaccinologist. With us on this broadcast is Dr. Pragya Yadav, scientist at the Indian Council for Medical Research, the National Institute of Virology, NIV. We've got Ambrose Pradeep, is the Chief Medical Officer of YRG Care. That's the YR Gaitonde Center for AIDS Research and Education, which is a non-profit organization in India working in the sphere of sexually transmitted diseases. Last, Harish Iyer, equal rights activist and columnist. So welcome to all our guests. Let me go across first and foremost to Dr. Suresh Kumar, who has a patient on his watch at this moment who's suffering from monkeypox. This patient, from what I've read in the story filed by Sneha and Milan, didn't travel abroad and therefore managed to contact the disease, apparently on some kind of a holiday he'd taken with his male friends. Can you tell us how this patient is doing? How badly off is he? How do you think he could have contacted the disease? And what do you make of what you're seeing around you at this moment? Dr. Kumar.
This gentleman was admitted in our hospital, Loknaik Hospital, 3 days back, and he had a history of fever and skin rashes. These skin rashes were first appeared in the lower limb and then abdomen and thorax, and then gradually on the face and on the palms. So the classical skin lesion along with the history of travel inland, not international travel, but this patient had a typical skin lesion. So initially we thought that it is a suspected case of monkeypox virus because we have not seen any case of monkeypox virus in national capital. So this was kept in the observation and we sent the sample to NIV Pune, and just on the Sunday we got the report that this person is having PCR positive case of monkeypox. So we don't know how exactly he acquired the infection because he has a history of domestic travel. Earlier we have seen that the cases in the Kerala, they have the history of travel to the Middle East or Dubai, but this case never traveled abroad. But this patient have a classical skin lesions, and we all know that this is a zoonotic disease initially found in the Africa, and then we have seen more and more countries reporting this monkeypox cases. Right now we have the 4th case reported in the country, and this is stable right now. His vital parameters are stable and he is recovering well. We hope that he recovers in a few days.
Dr. Shahid Jamil, virtually everyone watching at this time would wonder, what does WHO declaring monkeypox a public health emergency of international concern mean in the real world? How scared should we be at this moment? How does this compare with the COVID pandemic?
Well, I mean, these are two completely different viruses, but let's come to the WHO decision first. If you recall, WHO came under a lot of bad press, a lot of criticism for not declaring COVID as a global health emergency early enough. So one is, a case of being more proactive this time, but importantly, declaring it as a global health emergency will now help focus attention on this disease. Remember, we are in a pandemic, so a lot of attention is on COVID, and understandably so. But this declaration also puts onus on various governments across the world to pay more attention, WHO itself and its systems to gear up towards vaccines for monkeypox that are available, but not available in enough stocks, a drug that is available, but only an investigational drug which can be used through proper authorization. So I think the main reason for this has been WHO's, WHO wanting to focus global attention on this disease. After all, in the past few months, there have now been almost 17,000 cases being reported from 75 different countries. This has never happened earlier for something like monkeypox.
No, but what's different? From what I'm reading, monkeypox has been around from at least 1970. If that is the case, then why is it spreading more now? Apparently, the first case of monkeypox in humans was reported in 1970 in the Democratic Republic of Congo in a 9-year-old boy. In 2003, monkeypox outbreak was reported for the first time outside Africa, and the United States was linked to the contact with an infected pet prairie dog imported from Ghana. So what's changed now and why?
Well, we can only speculate at this time because we don't know the real reasons. I mean, I would be very concerned if the real reason is that monkeypox has also gone into rodent populations in the countries that are being affected. But most likely, this looks like the virus has exploited a very close network, and this is the MSM network. But, going back to the discussion that was happening earlier in the clip that you showed, I really don't think monkeypox can be called a sexually transmitted infection. That's one route of transmission if the lesions are present in the genital area, but otherwise it's not. I mean, it's transmitted through close contact, it's transmitted through respiratory droplets, but it's not necessarily a sexually transmitted disease. So to answer your question, we can only speculate. I don't think we'll have an answer till we do more surveillance.
Dr. Chandrakant Lahiri, at this moment, what are the lines of treatment? If, God forbid, somebody were to have suspected monkeypox, in terms of getting tested, what do they need to do? In terms of medicines, what are the medicines available? What kind of vaccines are there? Do we in India have access to those vaccines?
So what we know that monkeypox is largely self-limiting viral illness. So
what does that mean?
It means that usually symptoms are mild and person recover without any medication. So what is required, usually if person has a fever, then you manage the fever, or any other symptoms. If rashes are there, you just take care of rashes. What one need to worry if there are complications, and which complication could be any part of the body, and including lungs, etc. So you have to take care of complications. So what happens, majority of patients recover usually in the longest period of 4 to 5 weeks, but they recover fully. And the example is that though in the non-endemic countries outside Africa, though around 15,500 cases have been, confirmed cases have been reported, but there has not been any death outside Africa. So this is a fairly self-limiting disease. Having said that, there are one medication, therapy tecovirimat, antiviral, which was originally developed for smallpox, has been approved against monkeypox, but again, this is available limited stock in a high-income country, European settings, and United States.
Do we have it in India?
To my knowledge, it is not available in India. It's only.
Do you think if the government is watching at this time, you would encourage them to start buying and stocking up on this antiviral?
I think this is what going to happen with both antivirals as well as with vaccines, because there are a few smallpox vaccines also which have been given emergency use authorization in European settings and United States and Japan against the monkeypox. But again, those vaccines are not available in India. So once this is declared as a public health emergency of international concern, all countries, including India, should explore how to secure some stocks of the tecovirimat, the therapeutic, as well as that of the vaccine. Also, the National Vaccine Committee should be looking at that if vaccines, like how to procure the vaccine, and once vaccines are available, because those are irrespective of whether we have or not, are going to be limited stock, how to prioritize those vaccines. So definitely, even though
do any of the Indian companies manufacture these vaccines?
No, there is no Indian company which is manufacturing the vaccine, because this is only the second generation and third generation vaccine, which are really relatively advanced than the original vaccines which were used for smallpox eradication before 1980 were manufactured in India. So the second generation and third generation, which are recommended for monkeypox, are not available in India. But I am sure with this kind of public health emergency being declared at the global level, there would be collaboration, and that's what the focus should be, to procure and have a collaboration to produce vaccine in India, or if that is not immediately possible, then secure some stock.
Now, Harish Iyer, we saw how even some doctors are convinced that this is a sexually transmitted disease, even though genuine bona fide experts are saying it's not. Sexual transmission is one line in which the virus can be spread. There are multiple other ways, including close contact, droplets, bed linen coming in touch. Therefore, there are other ways in which monkeypox can spread as well. But the message that seems to have gone on, there's a lot of disinformation around this, is, and it's, in some senses it is true that largely it is spreading from intercourse between men. So there is A, misinformation, B, in part it is also true that monkeypox is largely spreading through men, even though that's not the only way in which it can spread, and therefore it almost certainly isn't a sexually transmitted disease.
Well, thank you first, Rahul, for speaking about this issue, because I think we should be proactive in speaking about these issues. Secondly, we also need to exercise caution when we speak about these issues, because This could lead to the demonization of an entire community of LGBTQ people. It is true that that the case history has been of people from the community, but we need to look at them as not as super spreaders, but as people who have been victimized. And it's been in that close population, we don't know if it spreads through intercourse, but it definitely spreads through close physical contact. So it could be a small population which has been affected. And this is the same thing. The same stigmatization is something that WHO warns us about as well in its press release. What it actually says is that they should not reach the levels of stigma. It's been an awareness drive from WHO where they've said that it has been found in this community, and because this community is marginalized and we live in close proximity with each other, we could have partners in this community. It is spread in this community, so we need to be cautious about it. Also, we need to take lessons from the AIDS pandemic that we have had. It was called the it was called GRID at one point of time, and it was something called as a gay disease. But later on, we found out that it was not just homosexuals, but anyone, and there were many other modes of transmission. Same is the case over here. It's not a sexually transmitted disease. It is a disease where people come in close contact with each other and it spreads. And we need to fight against disinformation that could spread to epic proportions and stigmatization for the LGBTQ community.
Dr. Ambrose Pradeep, you spend a lot of time in this space doing advocacy, doing research. Harish Iyer makes an important point. You need to prevent stigma. But just given how human beings are, in the way that word travels, generalizations are abound. Therefore, how do you prevent that stigma from spreading and just ensuring that it doesn't just go out that this is basically spreading through sex between gay men, which isn't the case?
No, I think I agree with Harish. I think it echoes the way things are being portrayed now. It echoes like how it started with HIV, like it was called GRID. And it was predominantly thought a disease of gay men. So what actually happened was the rest of the community were actually left out before you realize that everyone in the community gets affected. The same thing is happening probably here as well. I think it's not a sexually contracted disease. It is a disease which spreads through close contacts. Probably the fact that it started off in the gay community, and we just had a Pride Month in the month of June. It's probably the reason, a lot of gatherings has probably helped the spread of infections. But we probably need to look at other communities as well. It's just not limited to gay men or bisexual men. And I think we should stop using these headlines that says gay or bisexual men. To also reiterate, even with HIV, when it was first identified in India, it was identified in commercial sex workers. It's probably why it's still stigmatized that, people are always judged as to, with a moral compass, thinking, anybody who has HIV invariably would have had to go to a commercial sex worker or something like that. So breaking that initial line or a statement that somebody makes, it's very difficult in the community. So I don't really know. So the only thing that you can probably do is take out that tag that says that, it's a disease of gay men, and probably try to promote it as a disease that spreads through close contacts.
Dr. Pragya Yadav at the National Institute of Virology, where you're also a scientist at the Indian Council of Medical Research. When you look at the manner in which these reports are coming to you at the NIV, and the most recent example is of the COVID pandemic, when you compare the two viruses in layman's language, what are the similarities, what are the dissimilarities?
So, thank you, Mr. Rahul. Similarity, and it's very difficult to compare these two diseases. They are very different diseases, like SARS coronavirus transmitted mainly through the sneezing, coughing, and by oral aerosol. But in case of monkeypox, which is a pox DNA virus, SARS coronavirus is a RNA virus. and DNA virus. This virus is very large in genome size, and also we don't see the mutation which we have seen during SARS coronavirus, which has gone through different variants and then variant of concern. So those.
Sorry, can I pause you to ask what might seem a rather lay and silly question to you, but is important in my view? You're saying it's not mutating. Why?
So I'm not saying it's not mutating, but I'm saying it will not mutate as fast and with the speed which we have in SARS, because it is a DNA virus which has its own DNA polymerase, and the rate of mutation or changes are lower. But recently, when these cases started, and now as we know that there are more than 17,000 cases across the world, and it is passing from one human to human. So there, people are seeing some mutation, but there is not much significant which can bother scientifically people across the world.
No, so from what I gather, there are apparently two strains of this virus. One is the Congo strain. The second is the West African strain. The Congo strain is more fatal than the West African strain. The Congo strain has a mortality rate of 10%. The West African strain has a mortality rate of only 1%, which means only 1 of 100 people, if they get the West African strain, die. 1 of 10 people, if they get the Congo strain, could die. Which strain do we have in India?
So, the outbreak which is started and spreading across the globe is caused by the West African strain, and India, all 4 cases which has been detected found the same strain, which is West African strain. Not only by the real-time PCR, but also by genome sequencing, it is confirmed. So I think that reduce worry also that we have less pathogenic or severe strain in India as it is present in the rest of the part.
The other thing that became really important at the time of the COVID pandemic was the R rate, the rate of transmissibility. You said that it transmits from one person to another. Is that the way it's likely to be, or could that go up or go down?
So at the moment, initially it was 1-to-1, but now there are some cluster of cases are getting reported, but still R0 is very low in compared to SARS coronavirus, which we have seen.
Why is it low, Dr. Shahid Jamil? I'm sorry, I'm glad that it is low, but just so that I understand, why is the rate of transmissibility of the monkeypox virus much lesser than the rate of transmissibility of the coronavirus?
Well, when you talk about R0 value, you talk about community transmission. So far, the monkeypox virus is transmitting in very close networks. So it's not really transmitting, at least so far, that much in the community. Although that's the next thing that will happen. It will get into the community. It's already getting in the community. If we see what happened in the Delhi case, it's probably a case of community transmission.
No, but if you were to look out into the future, where does the monkeypox graph go from here? Will it see like a sharp hockey stick-like increase? Will it be very gradual? How do you see the rate of increase of monkeypox cases?
I think it's difficult to say, but I would err on the side of caution. India being a country with high population density, especially in the big cities. I mean, imagine traveling in a Mumbai suburban train or in a bus in Delhi. You come into close contact with people, and this virus is transmitted through respiratory droplets. And there's a difference between droplets and aerosol, which is COVID transmission. It will spread, but I don't know whether it'll be an exponential increase or whether it'll be a more slower increase.
Let me put that same question to Chandrakant Lahiri and get his sense on whether we're going to see an arithmetic progression in the number of cases or a geometric progression, which suggests that there'll be a much faster increase in the number of cases from here. Is there any way of knowing at all? How would you be determining your response to this question?
So there are two things which we need to remember to understand this aspect. One is that SARS-CoV-2, which spread really fast, is a respiratory illness. And this one, monkeypox, is not a respiratory illness, contact illness. So rate of spread is going to be slow. That's part one. Second part is that what happens in SARS-CoV-2, COVID-19, that even asymptomatic individual, the individual who do not have symptom can pass on to other person, and that person can have full-fledged illness. But that is not the case with monkeypox. One of the good things in monkeypox is that person has to have symptoms to become infectious or pass on to other people. So if somebody has symptoms, you can identify, isolate that person, trace their contact. That's how you can slow down the...
So you're saying if they don't have symptoms, they can't pass the disease on. They can't pass the virus on.
Yeah, so asymptomatic individual cannot pass on, only symptomatic person with symptom can pass on. And that is the reason everyone is saying...
Are symptoms always visible? Because I'm reading here that oftentimes the symptoms could be in the genital areas and therefore may not be visible. If you, for example, are in a bus or a metro with someone, you may not know that that person has monkeypox because it's in parts of the body which are covered by clothes.
That is true. Symptoms are not always visible, but you broadly know that contact illness spreads slower pace, and then symptomatic individual can pass on, gives us some assurance that we can identify early and reduce the rate of transmission. Putting that together, we need to also remember that once a virus is reported in any setting, for example, Zika virus was almost unheard 4 or 5 years ago. And then there were outbreaks, and now we know through a recent ICMR, Indian Council of Medical Research study, that Zika virus is in many states of India. Similar way, now monkeypox has been reported from the country, so we should be mentally prepared that more cases might come in days and months ahead, and virus might be reported from India in the long run. But we should not be immediately concerned or worried because of the reasons we have discussed. A contact illness, which can be effectively controlled, there is a medication available, there are vaccines available. All we need to do is strengthen surveillance, identify cases, and trace their contacts, and if vaccines and treatments are available, start putting on them. So,
no, but the vaccines aren't available in India. You're saying, yes, vaccines are available, but that's in a very generic sense. In India, those vaccines aren't available at this moment. Dr. Suresh Kumar, I started with you, I'll end with you. Since you're treating a patient of monkeypox, and when we put out that graphic explaining all the symptoms, headache, body ache, swelling, how bad is it? Like, is this like a mild illness? Is this a severe illness? Like, how bad does it get?
We have this gentleman with the mild illness. Right now, there's no fever right now, but he had definitely the eruptions of skin eruptions, some of the vesiculopustular rash over the trunk and lower limb, and also on the upper limb.
Is it typically mild, or could it get much worse as well?
Headache, mild, only mild. And the fever lasted only for 5 days, and after the fever was over, then he had the skin eruptions. And now that is also in the crusting phase, and patient is recovering well, and he himself said that he is much better after hospitalization. Initially he felt some sort of body ache and headache and irritation in the eyes, but right now we have multiple consultation by the different specialties that he's fully recovering well, and he's getting SOS medicines. There's no need of any panic, and patient is comfortable.
Shahid Jameel, is it always mild, or could there be cases where if there is some kind of a comorbidity? From what I gather, if you have other, which is true for all illnesses actually, if you have...
It is true for all, yeah.
Yeah, but
it is true for all illnesses. I mean, there will be a variety of symptoms. And after all, the mortality rate is 1%, although in this case, we haven't seen 1%. There are total confirmed 5 deaths globally out of about 17,000. So that translates to much less. One final point I wanted to make, Rahul, is that this declaration by WHO also makes it easier for patent restrictions to be smoothed out.
That's important.
For both vaccines and drugs. And therefore, if the government is listening, I would very strongly recommend that considering our pharma and vaccine industry, we should get on with it and start making these.
Find your AstraZeneca.
For us, it will be good for the
world. Go out
world.
and get that vaccine as quickly as you can. Don't just sit around. Be proactive. I think that's the advice.
Not just get the vaccine, get license to make the vaccine.
Oh, absolutely. Get license to make that vaccine, and then not just give it to your own population, but also, like we're doing at this moment with the coronavirus, ensure that your vaccine is made available to others. This was a very important conversation, and I'm glad that we had sensible voices giving us deep insights rather than spreading panic or adding to the disinformation. For the time being, Dr. Chandrakant Lahiria, Suresh Kumar, Dr. Pragya Yadav, Ambrose Pradeep, Harish Iyer, and Dr. Shahid Jamil for joining me on the Newstrack special on the monkeypox. The first show we've done on the monkeypox in the Newstrack. Very significant that this is now a public health emergency. The good thing though, as Dr. Jamil said, is that you can now use this to expedite the speed at which you get your antivirals, the speed at which you get your vaccines, and the speed at which you gear up to deal with this public health emergency. We're slipping into a quick break right now. When we come back, the first interview of India's chief economic advisor, the man who maps India's economy, V. Anant Nageshwaran, coming up exclusive on the other side of a very quick break. What happens to the economy from here? How bad is the downturn? What happens to global recessionary headwinds that are coming India's way? All that and more with the chief economic advisor to the government of India, Anant Nageshwaran. Excerpts coming up on the other side.
इस समय पूरी दुनिया में लोग कंफ्यूज्ड हैं। वो समझ नहीं पा रहे हैं क्या सही है, क्या गलत है, क्या सच है, क्या झूठ है। और ये स्पष्टता हम आपको अपने इस नए शो में देंगे। सब कुछ ब्लैक एंड व्हाइट में बताएंगे। इस शो में मेरे बालों के अलावा कुछ ग्रे नहीं होगा। हर खबर ब्लैक एंड व्हाइट की तरह बिल्कुल स्पष्ट होगी।
Did you know the Chinese military is developing a weapon capable of destroying Elon Musk's Starlink satellite? Well, yes, a team of Chinese researchers have reportedly published a study calling for anti-satellite capabilities that could disable Elon Musk's Starlink satellites. The tweet reads, and I quote, "A combination of soft and hard kill methods should be adopted to make some Starlink satellites lose their functions and destroy the constellation's operating system." The study is set to call for a combination of soft and hard kill methods that could be used to stop some Starlink satellites from working. However, according to reports, the study could not be confirmed as the official stance of the Chinese military or its government. What is Starlink satellite? Starlink is a satellite constellation system operated by Musk's SpaceX. It provides commercial and military users all over the world with high-speed internet access. With over 2,300 satellites in orbit, it is believed to be indestructible. The reason for this is that the system can continue to function normally even if some satellites are lost. In the next few years, SpaceX hopes to have as many as 12,000 satellites in its Starlink constellation, eventually expanding to 42,000. Why is China worried about Starlink? SpaceX recently signed a contract with the US Defense Department to develop new Starlink-based technology. It includes sensitive instruments which are capable of detecting and tracking hypersonic weapons. The researchers believe that US military drones and stealth fighter jets can strengthen their data by 100 times. As a result, the system poses a potential national security threat for China. Can China deal with it? China already has multiple methods for disabling satellites. These include microwave jammers that can disrupt communications or fry electrical components like powerful millimeter resolution lasers. But researchers say that these measures, which are effective against individual satellites, won't be enough to scuttle Starlink, considering Starlink is composed of thousands of small satellites. And maybe that's why the Chinese military needs a weapon capable enough of destroying Starlink satellite if they want to.
You are watching.
Tonight at 9 p.m. on the news today with me, Rajdeep Sardesai. From Bengal to Delhi via Maharashtra, opposition ruled states find themselves under the scanner of the Enforcement Directorate. Are the opposition states being selectively targeted by the central agencies? That's going to be a big talking point on the news today. Also, monkeypox cases are rising slowly but surely. Dr. Gagandeep Kang will tell us whether we should be worried. And Draupadi Murmu is sworn in as India's 15th president. We'll have all that and much more on the news today.
You're on board the Newstrack. It's not been a great year for India and countries around the world amid the ongoing geopolitical crisis. Back home, we started the year on a strong note, but inflation has played spoilsport. Now, with fears of a recession in the world economy looming large, will growth take a backseat in India, and to what extent? Here's what Ananta Nageshwaran, the new Chief Economic Advisor to the Government of India, had to say on all these and more. This is an exclusive conversation with Business Today's Global Business Editor, Udain Mukherjee.
The last few weeks, a lot of observers, analysts, brokerages, even global outfits have started bringing down growth for 2023, even for India. So they're saying that we'll get 7% plus growth in 2022. But in 23, some are already at 6.3%, 6.4%, and one or two have gone down all the way to 5.5% for 2023. Is that being alarmist, or do you think that might come to pass?
I'm not sure why people have sort of turned pessimistic, or rather somewhat downbeat for growth in 23-24 as far as India is concerned compared to 22-23. I can try and guess why they have done so, partly because they think the post-pandemic catch-up having been over, then there will be more moderate growth given global conditions, weak external demand, etc. But even then, I think there is an underestimation of the fact that India's potential growth is not as low as many of them might be thinking. The reason why they have probably, and this is my guess here, why they have probably lowered India's potential growth, and I happened to attend a World Bank seminar on that 2 weeks ago here in Delhi. They look at the last decade's capital formation, and that was obviously a stagnant capital formation scenario in India because companies were trimming their balance sheet. Banks were trimming their balance sheet. And we went through a financial system stress. Now, if you take that into consideration and extrapolate on that basis, then potential GDP growth would appear lower. But I actually would argue that on the contrary, because we went through a balance sheet repair phase in the financial sector, both banking and non-banking, and in the corporate sector, once the current uncertainties regarding the pandemic, regarding the conflict in Europe, etc., once they fade slowly over time, I would argue the opposite, that India may be poised to kind of repeat, if not exactly in the same magnitude as we did between 2003 and 2008, India might be poised to repeat some sort of a capital expenditure and credit boom as we experienced in the first decade of the new millennium. Therefore, I am at a loss to understand the pessimism of India's medium-term growth starting from 2023.
Let me bring you back to inflation in India, where there are clear signs of peaking in many parts of the commodity universe. But Indian core CPI, core inflation is still running at 6%, even if you look at the month of June. Is there an element of stickiness that you see or you fear in Indian inflation? Or because what one worries about is whether inflation expectations are getting entrenched after a few months of running very high. Where do you stand on that?
No, I mean, look, forget about this cycle. You could have asked a question about India's inflation stickiness at any point in time in the last 40 years or 50 years. And in my opinion, that stickiness comes from the fact that business compliance cost, our logistics efficiencies still need to be addressed. They are being addressed with respect to the introduction of GST and the physical infrastructure improvements, etc. But it will take some time for them to again be visible in terms of data. So there is a certain stickiness, and also it could be due to the fact that the capacities in India in several sectors are very small. I mean, the Indian industry and farm sector both are fragmented. I understand that we don't need behemoths, but we do need a vibrant Mittelstand, as they say in Germany. So we have extremely fragmented, inefficient spread of capacity both in the farm sector and in the factories. So these are all the reasons for the stickiness that you pointed out. But on the cyclical side, definitely the fact that we are concerned about a 7% inflation when the inflation rate even in Germany is close to 8 or 8.5%, in the US it is 9%, and in some other European countries it has even crossed double digits, etc., and not to mention the UK, etc. That to me gives me comfort that we are becoming intolerant of inflation. And that inflation intolerance will naturally feed into slower and more stable inflation expectations down the road. Our inflation expectations are not out of control as they were in the early part of the millennium between 2009 and 14. So in that sense, I would say India's inflation, while definitely it is above the target of 2 to 6% range, I think I think it has peaked, and a combination of measures, both fiscal and monetary, have definitely played their part in stabilizing expectations.
We spoke about exports being hit by a global slowdown earlier, Anand. I want your thoughts on what it could be doing to India's current account deficit, which has started growing again. And while we are nowhere close to the taper tantrum period situation of 2013, what it could do to the Indian currency. I know your thoughts about the rupee is not the only currency which is weakened against the dollar, and that point is taken and we agree on that. But what level of dislocation do you see on the current account deficit and on the currency front in the months ahead?
No, I think if you had asked me this question 1 month ago, I would have been more worried. But as we discussed earlier in the conversation, with the decline in the commodity prices, oil, industrial metals, food, etc., I'm much more sanguine about the current account situation than I would have been one month earlier. Yes, of course, there is going to be a slowdown in export growth because last year was a catch-up year and we did very well, both with manufacturing. But by the way, you must have noticed that Infosys actually upped its revenue guidance. So the services sector, IT sector exports are doing well, and therefore whatever we might lose in terms of the momentum, if not the actual, the growth rate will still be positive on manufacturing exports or merchandise exports in general. But the growth rate may be lower than what we saw in 21-22. So in that sense, there is a possibility that the overall export growth, including services, may not be as badly affected as we think because of external slowdown. But on the demand side, yes, we know the oil import bill, fertilizer import bill, etc., are all contributing to the potential rise in current account deficit to the tune of 2.8 to 3% of GDP, somewhere in the vicinity of $105 billion. And because of the monetary tightening, which usually is accompanied by flight to dollar and risk aversion on the part of portfolio investors, etc., there is concern about financing the current account deficit. But then that is the reason why, as RBI governor put it so well, that's the reason why you buy an umbrella when there is going to be a rain. So we have the $580 billion of reserves, and even if, and we have liberalized some interest rates calculations for non-resident Indian deposits and debt flows, and the government has raised the import duty on gold, etc. So on balance, I would argue, even though it's a challenging situation, and that is where the incremental developments of the last 4 weeks is actually in India's favor. So I'm more comfortable than I would have been a few weeks earlier about India's ability to handle the current account deficit, because bulk of its trade receivables or trade outstandings will be rolled over at a slightly higher interest rate. It is not the government of India that has got outstandings. It is the private sector, and India risk has not been perceived to be worse than what it was. If anything, India's risk has improved, and the Fitch improved the outlook for India's credit rating from negative to stable. So you put all these things together, I think while it is a challenge, I don't think it's an insurmountable challenge for India's monetary policy authorities or the fiscal authorities to handle the financing of the current account deficit this year or next year.
As we wrap up the Newstrack, I want to show you this report from Parliament and from Rashtrapati Bhavan. I was at the Central Hall this morning where Draupadi Murmu was sworn in as India's 15th president. So here's wishing Mananiya Murmu all the best as she gets set to be India's Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces and the President of the Indian Republic.
मैं द्रौपदी मुर्मू ईश्वर की शपथ लेता हूं कि
ईश्वर की शपथ लेती हूँ कि
मैं श्रद्धापूर्वक भारत के राष्ट्रपति के पद का कार्यपालन करूंगी।
India witnessing history. An Adivasi person taking oath as the president for the first time ever.
परिरक्षण, संरक्षण और प्रतिरक्षण करूंगी।
The swearing-in ceremony of Draupadi Murmu, the 15th President of India, was grand and elegant. Madam Murmu began the day with a floral tribute at Mahatma Gandhi's memorial Rajghat. After which she left for the President's house, where she was greeted by outgoing President Ramnath Kovind and his wife. Murmu and Kovind, flanked by the President's bodyguards, drove to Parliament for the oath.
Draupadi Murmu will soon hold with her the sacred responsibility.
The President-elect was escorted inside by Vice President Venkaiah Naidu, Lok Sabha Speaker Om Birla and Chief Justice of India N.V. Ramana. After the customary national anthem, the Chief Justice of India administered the oath of office to the new President.
भारत के राष्ट्रपति के पद का कार्यपालन करूंगी।
As a host of dignitaries including Prime Minister Modi, Home Minister Amit Shah and Congress Chief Sonia Gandhi watched on, Kovind exchanged the presidential chair with Murmu, symbolizing the top-level change of guard.
विशेषकर भारत के युवाओं को तथा भारत की महिलाओं को
The new president recalled her humble past and reiterated resolve to serve India in her inaugural speech.
राष्ट्रपति के पद पहुंचना मेरी व्यक्तिगत उपलब्धि नहीं है, ये भारत की प्रत्येक गरीब की उपलब्धि है। इस बात का सबूत है कि भारत में गरीब सपने भी देख सकता है और उन्हें पूरा भी कर सकता है।
After the oath, President Murmu was greeted with thunderous applause and Bharat Mata Ki Jai chants inside Central Hall of Parliament.
Simplicity and
President Murmu left for her new residence, the Rashtrapati Bhavan atop Raisina Hill, after the Parliament ceremony.
Of her life so far.
Prime Minister Modi drove down to join the new Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces, who was accorded a ceremonial Tri-Services Guard of Honour. Bureau Report, India Today.
Russia has defaulted on its sovereign debt. Moscow owes about $40 billion of sovereign bonds. Have the global sanctions now finally caught up? Is Russia in trouble, or does it still have friends when it comes to handling its economy? The foreign assets and foreign currency that have been frozen by the international bodies is a grave concern for Russia, given that even if Russia wants to make the payments, it really cannot. This sanction regime, or the sanctions that have been placed against Russia, with Russia now defaulting, is a grim reminder of the political outcast it once had become and is now on the way to becoming. But is it? While the West wants to isolate Russia, there are still many countries who are standing by Moscow and are engaging Russia. So is it real trouble for Russia, or will Russia see through this crisis as well as it did in the 90s? Now, with the economy and finances at stake, how severe are the damages?
Now, Russia had 640 billion US dollars in foreign currency and gold reserves held overseas. Russia owes 40 billion in sovereign bonds and half of it to foreigners. That's the part that has been defaulted this year, and it is a historic moment nonetheless. Having said that, the last time Russia defaulted was after the breakup of the Soviet Union. It also defaulted on domestic bonds in late 1990s but recovered very soon after. Investors across the world were monitoring what is happening to Russia and what is becoming of the situation vis-a-vis the West. They were monitoring the global sanctions and therefore anticipated the default that now is to be. This is a huge setback for Russia since Russia has not defaulted in so many years, and now with this default they are going to be out or cut off from the bond borrowing market.
A fandom war has erupted over India Today magazine's latest cover, and locked in battle here are fans of two superstars from the South who recently made it quite big globally with their record-breaking box office revenues for their recently released films. We're talking about none other than Pushpa fame Allu Arjun and Bahubali fame Prabhas. Allu Arjun shot to pan-India fame and attention with Pushpa The Rise. His appearance on India Today's cover page demonstrates the rise of southern Indian cinema. Allu Arjun's latest video hit over 5 billion views, a record-breaking feat for any Indian actor. This surely implicates that he is the front-runner in the South industry who's risen to fame exponentially. On the other hand, Prabhas had also made it to India Today's cover page back in May 2017. Well, now the comparison of both the cover pages by fans of both stars have sparked quite a row on social media. The war is all about which of these heroes have bigger pan-India fame and presence. Prabhas's fans say that his cover was more organic. The Prabhas Viral magazine issue was released titled Epic Blockbuster. Remember, Bahubali has raked up over 1,800 crores in revenues globally. So clearly Prabhas was the man of the season at that point. 2017 when Bahubali released, Prabhas was certainly the man to be on the cover page. And this time India Today decided to have Allu Arjun on the cover page of the India Today magazine, and he was shot in his typical Pushpa Raj style. Well, of course, this hasn't gone down well with Prabhas's fans. Many of Prabhas's fans on social media put out messages saying Allu Arjun's cover was just a mere PR stunt, while Prabhas's cover of 2017 was a lot more organic. Quickly, Allu Arjun fans jumped in saying that this is just some kind of jealousy that they could smell because Allu Arjun's cover has gained a lot of traction. So we see Allu's fans and Prabhas's fans fighting with each other on whose India Today magazine cover was more organic and was more a PR stunt. Both set of fans exchanging words here, but one thing's for sure, both the stars are equally important and are equally glorious. Well, what we do know is that Southern stars in the recent past has grabbed the world's attention with their stupendous success in films. And of course, India Today magazine will